The Steelers' coaching search is quietly moving into a phase that says a lot more than the headlines might suggest. And if you're paying close attention, the details matter. What's happening right now isn't random, and it isn't rushed. The organization is deliberately widening the lens, bringing in familiar names, experienced voices, and different leadership profiles as they try to define what the next era of Steelers football should actually look like. The most eye-catching development is the decision to conduct in-person interviews with Brian Flores and Mike McCarthy. On the surface, that alone sparked a wave of speculation, especially when early reports created confusion about whether Flores was receiving a second in-person meeting. That clarification matters. The reason these interviews are happening face-to-face is not because the Steelers are narrowing in on a final candidate, but because they already know these men well enough that virtual interviews aren't necessary. Familiarity, not favoritism, is driving this stage of the process. Brian Flores is not a stranger in Pittsburgh. He has already been inside the building, working as a defensive consultant during Terrell Austin's early tenure as defensive coordinator. That experience left an impression. Flores re-established his reputation as a sharp defensive mind after many around the league questioned his future following his lawsuit against the NFL and his exit from Miami. His subsequent work with the Vikings only reinforced that perception, as their defense consistently punched above its weight despite personnel limitations. Flores brings command, structure, and an edge. He has head coaching experience, understands how to stabilize a locker room, and has shown he can demand accountability even during rebuilds. At the same time, his history also raises legitimate questions. His tenure in Miami showed progress, but it also highlighted friction, particularly with organizational direction and quarterback development. That context matters when projecting fit. The Steelers are not simply looking for competence, they are looking for a leader who can define the next long-term identity of the franchise, not just manage a transition year or two. Mike McCarthy's inclusion in this process feels different, and that's why it's so intriguing. This wasn't a name many expected to surface, and yet when you break it down, it makes sense. McCarthy has deep Pittsburgh roots, a Super Bowl ring, decades of experience, and first-hand knowledge of what it takes to manage star quarterbacks and playoff expectations. One prevailing theory is that McCarthy is being used as a sounding board, a reference point. A coach who has seen it all can help an organization measure other candidates, sharpen questions, and clarify priorities. But there's another layer here that can't be ignored. McCarthy's career is closely tied to Aaron Rodgers. Their relationship wasn't always smooth, but it was successful, and it produced consistent playoff contention and a championship. With Mike Tomlin no longer in the picture, the likelihood of Rodgers returning to Pittsburgh naturally drops. His connection to Tomlin was real, emotional, and meaningful. Still, the door isn't completely closed. The Steelers understand that this quarterback class is not ideal, that trading up for the top prospects would be costly, and that free agent options like Malik Willis could spark bidding wars that eat into valuable cap space. Right now, the Steelers are positioning themselves with flexibility. They are not locking into one path. They are keeping multiple doors open. One of those doors may involve a veteran bridge at quarterback while the team prepares for a more aggressive move in a future draft. Another door involves a young, innovative head coach who brings a fresh voice and long-term vision. And another door, perhaps a contingency plan, involves stability, experience, and familiarity, even if it's temporary. This same philosophy extends to how the Steelers are handling their assistant coaches. By allowing assistants to explore other opportunities while making it clear that retention will depend on the incoming head coach's preferences, the organization is signaling respect for leadership autonomy. Whoever gets this job will be empowered to shape the staff, set the tone, and define the culture. That matters more than scheme, background, or side of the ball. When you zoom out, the real theme here is leadership. Recent hiring cycles around the league show swings between offensive and defensive coaches, but the data doesn't support the idea that one background guarantees success. Super Bowls, playoff runs, and sustained competitiveness come from leaders who command respect, manage adversity, and align everyone in the building. Art Rooney's own words reinforce this. The Steelers are not narrowing the box. They are prioritizing presence, authority, and the ability to motivate. This search may take longer than fans want, especially with candidates like Chris Shula unavailable for in-person meetings until after the conference championship games. But patience here is intentional. The Steelers are not just replacing a head coach, they are defining what comes after Mike Tomlin, and that is not something you rush. So, as this process continues to unfold, and as names like Flores and McCarthy circulate alongside younger, less familiar candidates, the real question becomes this: do you believe the Steelers should prioritize proven leadership and experience, even if it means a shorter-term solution? Or should they gamble on a younger voice, with the hope of building the next long-term era from scratch? What do you think about the direction this coaching search is taking right now? What makes this moment so delicate is that the Steelers are balancing two timelines at once, and that tension is clearly influencing every move they make. On one hand, there is a roster that still has real pillars in place, veterans who expect to compete, leaders who are not interested in hearing about multi-year patience plans. On the other hand, there is an organization fully aware that the next truly defining quarterback and the next truly defining coach might not arrive in the same offseason. That reality forces creativity, restraint, and contingency planning. That's why the interviews with Brian Flores and Mike McCarthy should be viewed less as endpoints and more as reference points. Flores represents familiarity without stagnation. He understands the Steelers' building, the culture, and the expectations. But he also brings a more modern defensive edge shaped by recent success elsewhere. If hired, there would be less of an onboarding curve. Players would know what kind of standards he demands, and the front office would know how he operates under pressure. The risk, however, is whether that path truly pushes the franchise forward or simply stabilizes it in place. McCarthy, meanwhile, symbolizes optionality. He is experience personified. He has navigated quarterback egos, playoff disappointments, championship expectations, and locker room volatility. If the Steelers find themselves boxed out of their preferred younger candidates, or if the quarterback market unfolds in an unfavorable way, McCarthy becomes a viable bridge. Not a symbolic one, but a functional one. Someone who can keep the team competitive, credible, and structured while the front office prepares its next aggressive move.
This also explains why the Steelers appear comfortable letting the process breathe. They know they cannot speak in person with certain candidates until later, and they are not panicking to fill the gap. That patience signals confidence in their internal evaluation process. They are gathering information, stress-testing theories, and measuring how each candidate aligns with what Art Rooney emphasized repeatedly: leadership above all else. The numbers around offensive versus defensive head coaches only reinforce that message. Trends come and go. Cycles swing back and forth. What doesn't change is the need for someone who can stand in front of the room every day and be believed. Someone whose voice carries weight after a loss, during a losing streak, and in January when the margin for error disappears. The Steelers' greatest eras were not built solely on scheme. They were built on trust, authority, and clarity of vision. That's why this decision feels heavier than most coaching searches. This isn't just about next season. It's about whether the Steelers want continuity with controlled evolution or a sharper pivot towards something entirely new. It's about whether they value certainty in leadership while gambling elsewhere, or whether they want to gamble on leadership itself and accept the growing pains that come with it. Nothing about the current approach suggests confusion. If anything, it suggests caution informed by history. The Steelers are protecting themselves from being cornered into a single solution. They are keeping leverage. They are acknowledging uncertainty instead of pretending it doesn't exist. And in a league that punishes desperation, that may be the smartest move of all. As this search continues, every interview, every delay, and every rumor should be viewed through that lens. Not who is the flashiest name, but who best fits the moment the franchise is actually in, not the one fans wish it were in. If you're following this closely, now is the time to weigh in. Do you believe the Steelers should commit fully to a younger coach and accept short-term turbulence? Or do you think a steadier, experienced hand is the right way to navigate this transitional window? Another layer that can't be ignored is how this coaching decision will ripple through every other major choice the Steelers are about to make. The head coach they hire will not just influence schemes or play-calling tendencies, but how aggressive the front office feels it can be in free agency, how patient it can afford to be at quarterback, and how much internal development it expects from a roster that is still very much in flux. If the Steelers lean toward a younger, less experienced head coach, that signals a willingness to accept some early volatility. It suggests the organization is prepared to live through mistakes, uneven stretches, and growing pains in exchange for the chance to build something modern and sustainable. In that scenario, roster decisions might skew younger, contracts might be structured with longer horizons in mind, and short-term results could take a back seat to long-term alignment. If they go the opposite direction and choose a coach with deep experience, that sends a very different message. That path prioritizes credibility inside the locker room from day one. Veterans hear it. Free agents notice it. The expectation becomes that the Steelers are still trying to win now, even if now comes with limitations at quarterback or coordinator. That approach doesn't eliminate the future plan, but it delays the most aggressive version of it until the foundation feels more stable. This is where the quarterback discussion becomes inseparable from the coaching search. The Steelers know they are unlikely to draft a true franchise quarterback this year without a major trade-up. They also know that the free agent market could become expensive fast, especially if multiple teams chase the same names. Paying premium money for a short-term solution can quickly restrict roster flexibility elsewhere, and this team still has clear needs across the board. That's why the idea of a bridge, whether at quarterback or at head coach, keeps surfacing, not as a sign of indecision, but as a calculated acknowledgement of timing. The Steelers are trying to synchronize their next big swing. They don't want a coach whose timeline doesn't match the quarterback. They don't want a quarterback whose development window doesn't match the coach. And they don't want to sacrifice roster balance just to force alignment that isn't naturally there yet. What's clear is that leadership remains the anchor point of every conversation. The organization has said it without saying it directly. Background, age, and scheme are secondary. The Steelers believe that if they get the right leader, the rest can be built around that foundation. That belief is rooted in their history, and it's shaping how patient they're willing to be right now. This is why the process feels methodical instead of reactive. Each interview adds context. Each delay allows more information to surface. Each candidate helps clarify what the Steelers want, even if that candidate never gets the job. They are not searching for perfection. They are searching for fit. As fans, it's easy to crave certainty, a name, a direction that feels decisive. But moments like this rarely offer clean answers. They offer trade-offs. And the Steelers are clearly weighing those trade-offs carefully, knowing that the consequences of this decision will echo far beyond the next season. There's also an internal reality that fans don't always see, but it plays a massive role in moments like this. The Steelers are redefining how much control the next head coach will have. For decades, stability at the top meant continuity everywhere else. Now, for the first time in a long while, the organization is intentionally stepping back and allowing the next coach to imprint his vision more fully. That is not a small shift. It changes how assistants are evaluated, how responsibilities are delegated, and how quickly cultural changes can actually take hold. By allowing current assistants to explore other opportunities and by making it clear that no one is guaranteed to stay without the new head coach's approval, the Steelers are signaling trust in whoever they hire. They are saying, "This is your team to build." That level of empowerment will appeal differently to different candidates. A younger coach may see it as a rare chance to grow into the role without being boxed in. A veteran coach may see it as the autonomy needed to implement proven systems without resistance. This distinction matters because it will influence not only who accepts the job, but how committed they are once they're in the building. A coach who feels ownership moves differently. He holds people accountable differently. He establishes standards faster. And in a locker room that is transitioning, clarity matters just as much as talent. Another important element is how the Steelers are positioning themselves publicly. There is no desperation leaking out, no rushed timelines, no messaging that suggests panic. That calm is intentional. It protects leverage. It allows the organization to pivot if a preferred option becomes unavailable, and it prevents the narrative from being driven by outside pressure rather than internal conviction. This approach also gives the Steelers space to evaluate how the rest of the league is behaving. Coaching markets, quarterback markets, and free agency are interconnected. One move elsewhere can reshape the board entirely. By staying patient, the Steelers keep themselves adaptable rather than reactive. All of this reinforces one core truth. This is not a single decision in isolation. It's a chain reaction. The head coach influences the quarterback plan. The quarterback plan influences roster spending. Roster spending influences competitive expectations. And expectations determine how quickly success is judged. The Steelers know this. That's why they are resisting the urge to simplify a complex moment. At its core, this search is about identity. What does Steelers football look like without Mike Tomlin at the center of it? Is it louder or quieter? More aggressive or more controlled? Younger or steadier? There is no universally correct answer, but there is a right answer for this specific roster, this specific moment, and this specific organization. As the next interviews take place and the list inevitably narrows, remember that silence does not mean inactivity. Decisions are being shaped right now that will define the direction of the franchise for years. And whether the final choice feels safe or bold, it will be the result of deliberate evaluation, not impulse. What often gets lost in this conversation is how rare this level of optionality actually is. Most teams enter a coaching search boxed in by urgency, cap problems, or a desperate need to sell hope. The